How's everybody doing today? How have things been with your environment? We did have that situation yesterday where we had a bottleneck in one of our services that prevented us from launching all of our VNFs at the same time. That bottleneck has been addressed. So once again, thank you everyone for being an important part of the OSM community and helping us move it forward in this way. So to go again on the big picture here. This is the environment that we're working with. And today we're going to be looking specifically at VNF orchestration, or sorry, this morning we're looking at VNF orchestration and very specifically at the virtual desktop. So right now, this is basically all that we should have in our cloud environment. We have our firewall and a private network. We have nothing deployed in Kubernetes right now. And, oh, I should probably ask if you have played around with your firewall and done the NS action on it to add a port forward rule. We're going to be using rule number 10 again in this morning's session. So you would either need to modify the script, like copy the script into your local directory and modify it to use another rule, or go ahead and perform the delete firewall or remove port forward action to remove rule 10. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a failed action due to a conflict because the firewall has to enumerate all of its rules. And if we try and set 2 rules called 10, it's going to come back and say, no can do. So we have our private network. We have OSM. It's aware of OpenStack. Now we're going to tell it to launch a virtual network function that contains some native operations code, a native charm. When that charm starts up, it's going to take this VM and launch the full desktop on it. It is actually just a straight Ubuntu cloud image. So there's nothing more than like SSH and a couple packages installed on it. So this charm is going to like essentially install the desktop and all needed software on demand. So if we wanted to, we could change this base image, you know, to Ubuntu 2010 or 2104 when that one comes in. So focus on virtualized network function operations. We're going to be looking at how OSM brings up charm code in order to perform operations on a virtualized network function. So to sort of go back to this slide and how things have fit together, this is the area that we're concentrating on for this session. Useful scripts. All the scripts are going to be in the Hackfest Day 2, Session 1, VNF primitives. There's the virtual PC build script, which is going to build the descriptors from the get sources that we cloned yesterday. There's a virtual PC launch. We have a virtual PC watch progress script and an action set of scripts that we can look at that will show us what actions can be done. So the first thing we'd like to do is build the packages. So I'm going to go ahead and start my terminal here again. OSM instructor 5. So here I am logging in as my tenant in the jump host. Sorry, once again, we have an open mic. I'd like to ask everyone to please keep yourself muted as we're going through the sessions. Thank you. So if I go now into my OSM packages directory, I should be able to just go ahead and run the script to build the virtual PC. Hackfest. Actually, what I'm going to do first is, just in case, anyone, 2.1 virtual PC build. Let's just take a look at the contents of this script. So here you can see that it just goes into the charm source directory, builds the charm, copies the build output to a final directory, makes sure that there's no old copies of it in your OSM instance, builds them, and then uploads them. So this here, Charmcraft build, is where a lot of the heavy lifting happens, and that basically creates the virtual environment, all the software dependencies, everything like pip install, etc., that would be needed by the package at runtime. So once this is uploaded to OSM, nothing further is needed. So we can go ahead and run this script now. I can see there looks like there's a lot of people who are currently also running the script, which is great news. Hackfest virtual PC star.tar.gz. So at the end of it, we can see we've got the network service descriptor that is about 1K in size, and the VNF descriptor, which is almost 800K in size. The reason why it's so large is, as I mentioned, it contains all the software that's needed at runtime for the Python charms to be able to do their job. So nothing needs to be installed. So these packages have been uploaded now. I can do an OSM NSD list, and I see that I have my virtual PC uploaded. And if I do a VNFD list, I can see the virtual descriptor, the virtual function descriptor is also uploaded. So going back to here, if you want, you can also go into the web UI, and you should also be able to see your descriptors uploaded there. So I can take a quick side track to show that, 21.1.4 in my case. Yours will be 1.9 or 1.10, depending on if your user 1 through 30 or 30 through 31. So I go ahead and I log in as myself here, and I can see that under packages, network service packages, I have my virtual PC. One thing that you can actually do from here as well is you can edit the descriptor, or at least review it if you don't do update, if you just tab out of here, or you can toggle read-only mode if you just want to be able to review the content of the descriptor. Same thing is possible as well for the VNF packages. You can go in here and take a look at the descriptor for the VNF package. So in here, we'll keep presenting, sorry. We can now go ahead and launch our virtual PC. So I'm going to go ahead over here, and I will just quickly give you a review of what the launch command looks like. And it's nothing more than making sure that it's going to use the Vim that you've created. You should have your firewall still. If you have your basic VNF from the checkpoint yesterday, you can go ahead and remove that. So let me double check in my thing here. If I take a look at my PDU instance, yeah, it's not in use. Okay, so I'm going to have to launch my firewall still. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in the background. Hackfest 1.7 PNF firewall launch. So please, if you've already got in your NS list, if you already have your firewall, do not do that again well, I mean, you can, but it's going to fail to launch it because the gateway is already in use. And we said that the gateway is not something that's shared. The PDU is not shared. If in your NS list, you have other services running, for example, basic VNF, we can go ahead and delete that. OSM-MS delete basic VNF. So this is my environment somewhat, cleaned out. We certainly can have more than one operation simultaneously. As as we know, we've got some 50 people all working simultaneously, so you don't have to worry about waiting for your basic VNF to terminate before you launch anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the virtual PC now, and it is being launched. So if I take a look at my network instances, I can see that my virtual desktop is being executed, being launched, and in my case, the firewall is being launched as well. So going ahead to the next slide, we can see the status of it. It's currently being built. And if we log into OSM, we can see that, not OSM, sorry, OpenStack, we can also see it running there. So if I go ahead to 172.21.18.18, so we log in as OSM Instructor 5, I can see that this virtual desktop is being built. It has a flavor. I gave this flavor a name. 8 CPUs, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and 120 gig of disk. So it's a fairly powerful machine that we're creating. I can go ahead and the virtual PC watch progress. And that's nothing more than just saying show the virtual NS show virtual desktop and grep for the status. So if I execute that, we'll be able to see the progress coming along. So taking a look next in our slide deck here, we can see basically the progress is going to show things running. Eventually, you're going to start seeing something like this down here, which is preparing the apt packages. So you'll actually be able to watch the entire installation take place through this view. So here's the installing software. Here is the NS show. Oh, here it's starting with installing apt packages. I'll just make this a little bit bigger. So while that's running, we'll go ahead and look ahead. It says once the configuration status becomes ready, the virtual desktop will be ready. Now, one thing to note is that here in OSM, in OpenStack, you can see that it has an IP address on the 18 subnet. While this is available right now, once the installation is complete, it's going to shut down this management interface because we don't want anyone to get into our virtual machine except through our firewall. So once the installation is complete, that's it. It's going to be locked down. Install, 73%. The remote desktop software has been installed. So far, so good. People are seeing their progress moving along. Oh, somebody's done already. Very exciting. Okay. My unit is now ready. So if I take a look here, remember I said I had this private IP address of 218. Okay, so for those who have a broken state, we're going to go ahead and do, so if we do this OSM NS list, we'll see virtual desktop. So if yours is in state broken, then go ahead and do an OSM-NS delete virtual desktop, please. Okay, and Dika is also helping out. And yes, that is correct, Carlo. If you force delete, we're deleting it in OSM only. So you may have to go into your OpenStack, and if the machine is there, go ahead, click on that and say delete instances. Just to give a bit of a picture of what the network looks like, our network topology. So here we can see we have the, oh, sorry, let me make this bigger here. We have this OSM external network, and we have the private network. We can see that the virtual desktop is still, it shows connected to both, but this link is now down to prevent us from gaining access. So if I do the OSM VNF list, it shows that I have an IP address for my virtual PC, but I will not be able to reach that because the firewall is now in the way. I cannot ping it. I cannot SSH to it. It is not reachable. OSM, it still has a public IP. No, we're not actually taking the, we're not actually removing that IP address from the pool. Normally in a more production-like environment, your management network and your tenant networks, like your data plane networks, would be more carefully separated. For the purpose of this Hackfest, we have just combined the two of them to keep things simpler. So yeah, normally we wouldn't even need to remove that interface. You would leave that management port open to, sort of keep things available if you ever needed to reach the management. We could have architected the network differently, but I didn't want to overcomplicate the way things were set up. So, so for those of you that are on Linux, there is a program called xfree-rdp. If you could check to see if you don't have that installed, then let's please go ahead and install that, because we're going to be using that momentarily. So what I'm going to do while we wait here is I'm going to just go through the next two steps just to keep things moving along. But basically, once our service is ready, what we're going to do is we're going to add a port forward rule to port forward 3389 to our internal IP address. So the one thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to ask OSM, okay, what random IP address did you assign to the private network, to the virtual PC on the private network? So inside this, sorry, cat, I should make a copy of this 1.7 PNF firewall actions. Here is where I have this desktop IP. So for those that actually have it running, you should be able to execute this desktop IP command here and be able to see the IP address that OSM assigned to the private subnet. So then if I actually run this firewall action script, it's going to go ahead and evaluate that and say, okay, desktop IP, look it up. Firewall action will be to add rule number 10, source port 3389, which is the remote desktop protocol port, to the desktop IP. So what I was going to do was basically show here from my computer, I can do an xfree-rdp. I don't know, for those who use Microsoft Windows, have you done remote desktop connections before? Okay, sorry, I'm looking at the meeting here. Okay, things are back now. Okay, so here we can see that I'm trying to launch the free RDP, like basically Microsoft Remote Desktop software for Linux. I'm trying to launch it against my firewall IP address. User will be Ubuntu, password is OSM 2021. So I go ahead and I try and launch this connection, and it says, nope, connect failed, cannot reach it. So what we're going to do is find our desktop IP and then run the action on the firewall to enable this port forward. Then we can do an OSM NS op list on the firewall. And I can see that the add port forward is still processing. And it has completed. So now when I initiate my remote desktop connection, and anyone who's doing it from Windows, it's the IP address of your firewall. Your username is Ubuntu and your password is OSM 2021. And so when we launch this now, and it'll ask you if you want to accept or trust the certificate of the RDP server. So we'll say, yes, we want to trust that. And then what's going to happen is you'll actually be presented with your full virtual desktop. So we can come back to this. The last two commands for the virtual desktop. Are you referring to the RDP connect command, or are you referring to the firewall action? So the firewall action basically looks like this, and the free RDP connection looks like this. Actually, let's not include the home drive because that may be very slow depending upon the speed of your VPN connection. So I'm going to remove the home drive from that. The W and H are width and height of the window. So that's something, you know, I could have said /F for full screen. I could make it, you know, width of 1024 with a height of 800. And then when it connects, it'll resize the desktop to that. The home drive is basically this thin client drives here, and it actually maps the home directory of my computer to the remote server. So if I were to go in here, you can see I'm just getting a little spinning hourglass while the VPN is very busy loading all of the content of my home drive across the network. So that's why from my command I had home drive, but I'm suggesting we remove that for you. Because it's like, as you can see, even for me, it's quite slow. So we won't let that continue, or we won't bother with that, I mean. So here are the commands that I pasted. And the next thing that we can do, we connect it to the desktop. And then there are a series of virtual PC actions that can be performed. So if I connect here again, we do have a list of actions that can be viewed. Hackfest, VNF, 2.1, virtual PC actions. So this lists actions that we can do. The cutest one is an announce action. And, you know, once we actually have, oh, sorry, I logged off. So here's my client. I go over here to my OSM and I say, I want to run this action, say, announce hello from the Hackfest. And over here, the person's working away on their computer and they get a message. Hello from the Hackfest.